further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started. I charged the panelists today with introducing themselves, but also letting us know briefly what their current title is and showing it to us if possible, so that we can know some of the books to go out and get for them. So I'm going to start with Annie.
Oh, thanks, Aurora. Well, my name is Annie McDonald, and I write lesbian romantic fiction. I'm an insanely proud Canadian whose retirement plan is to write a book for all of the provinces and territories in Canada. My first of these, Where We Are, was published in December 2019. And my new one, which is just hot off the presses, I don't even have a copy yet, is When Sparks Fly. It is set in and around Winnipeg, Manitoba, and it involves Dr. Daniela Waveney and an iron sculptor named Luca McCaffrey. They met first 15 years ago when Luca was actually involved in an on-ice collision that knocked her out of competitive hockey. And interestingly, written before COVID, the plot also has twists and turns around an undiagnosed, potentially contagious virus.
Wow, that sounds very exciting. I was very intrigued when I saw the cover. It's definitely going on my list. Leigh, tell us about you and your current book.
My name is Leigh Hayes, and I write contemporary lesbian romance. My second book is in the Providence series is Too Good to Be True, and it is about a divorced mother who has a sort of a wedding fling with a younger woman, and it turns out that she also, when she returns home to Providence, is her social worker at her son's school, and the rest of the book is their romance from there.
Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Zach. I am a lesbian contemporary romance. Well, not just lesbian. I have bisexuals in there too, and pansexuals. So just, LGBTQ contemporary romance. My latest is The Other Women, and it is about these two women that have had their heart broken by the same woman. They end up meeting and falling in love, and then all the trials and tribulations that follow. But it's a lot about heartbreak, and it's set in Vegas, which is, I love Vegas. So it was fun to write about it since we can't go right now without a mask on. And I don't really want to go gamble with a mask on. So yeah, and I love Star Wars, and that's me.
I think that's your list.
That's my list. That's my list. Vegas, Star Wars, and women. Hey.
I
mean, right?
That's a good one.
Last but not least, we have someone who probably at this point needs an introduction, but I will ask Allie to introduce herself and her current book as well.
Yes, I'm Vali. I also write contemporary, more romantic intrigue. I like to kill people in books. I didn't realize I have no experience with that. My latest book is One More Chance. I apologize. I did not have a copy of it right now, but it is set in New Orleans, as most of my books are. It is about a couple who met in third grade. They had this wonderful romance through high school, and they had a lot of plans for the future. And then one day, Harry went off to college, and Desi completely disappeared off the face of the earth with no explanation. It left Harry kind of heartbroken. And then 16 years later, in the emergency room of what is now considered Big Charity in New Orleans, they meet again because Desi is in the emergency room needing care, and Harry happens to be the orthopedic surgeon. So it starts off kind of bumpy and kind of builds from there.
I think Allie's books are like, does she kill one or two people, or does she kill like 10 or more people? Like, that's really the categories of books we're talking about. But we're not here to talk about killing people. We're here to talk about sexy times, which is literally what I write in my style sheet that I send to my editor. Like, you have to kind of do an outline of what your story is, and it's like chapter 15, sexy times. And that's all I give her. Just a little peek behind the curtain for y'all. So let's kind of kick it off with just like, do you have a heat level? Do you generally kind of write to a certain level of sort of detail or eroticism in your stories, or does it vary? And if you tend to sort of have one, I'm not going to make you rate yourself on chili peppers, but what would you say that heat level is? Okay, now I want to. On a scale of 1 to 10 chili peppers, you've got some room to grow. What's your typical heat level? Erin, I'm going to start with you.
So I'd like to say I'm a 10, but I'm not. I think I would be probably like around a 7 with room to grow, but I have a really hard time making myself get to that 7. Well, making myself right to get to that 7. I have a hard time writing some sex scenes sometimes, but I like them to be pretty explicit, not like raunchy, but explicit, because I think it's important, especially when you put the characters through so much. So
I think it's a good answer. And I'm going to now sort of qualify my question, which is that we're sort of talking about variations on the romance genre, not erotic romance or erotica, which are their own kind of separate genres within romance, kind of that 1 to 10. So I think 7 sort of makes fair, because I'm overqualifying. I don't know why. Leigh, how many chili peppers would you give yourself? Or your stories, not yourself. That's a different question.
Hey.
Get to that.
Wait.
Sorry.
Leigh, I asked you how many chili peppers you're going to give.
I missed that
yourself.
part of it.
Sorry.
You know, I don't know. I'd probably 8 or so. You know, I think it's funny because I'm the kind of person who watched The Graduate and was like, did they sleep together? So like, you know, so it has to be explicit for me to understand that it happened. So that's kind of, yeah, I would consider that. That's kind of the level that I have, is about an 8 or so. And I don't like, but I have no problem writing it. That's pretty easy for me. It's the emotion part that's harder for me. Yeah.
In feeling, I beta read for Leigh sometimes.
Yep.
More feelings, and then also, are you sure you want your characters to go through there the first time they have sex?
Yeah, there's that too.
That once. That's a bold choice. Andy, what about you?
That's funny because I asked a friend, what would you rate my stories on it? And I only have 2. What would you rate my stories on that same scale, actually, of peppers? And they said, my scale was to 5. She said 3.5. So that puts me at around a 7, which, and I think I'm very much like Erin here. I actually find it very difficult to write sex scenes. So when I do get one done, I think it's like way higher. But it's actually really not. So, but I'm working on it. I actually, because I've been reading a lot more in the genre, and I'm really sort of seeing, you know, what readers, not necessarily their expectations are, but what do the characters demand in terms of the sex that they have and how much I as an author want to present to the reader. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I'm a 7.
I like this. Allie.
It's interesting because when I first started, you try to make it, you know, you try to vary the sex scenes. And then so I would probably be, back then I was probably like a 4. And then audiobooks came along. And as you listen to them, I like to listen to audiobooks while I'm cutting grass, which I do a lot of. So as I'm going, and then Fiona, who we all know is like the queen of heat. One day I was at the office actually, and I ended up weed eating my feet. So standing there, and I figured out, it's like, okay, I need to kind of change a little bit. So now I'm thinking like an 8 with room to grow. So.
There's not a lot of room to grow if you're
No, I was laughing because when the last book, One More Chance, when your narrator emails you and says, damn girl, there's a lot of talking in this sec. So I figured that was good. So maybe that was like a 9.
I think it sort of varies, like, you know, your characters kind of develop and different characters kind of have different things. But I think it's nice to kind of give people an idea, because some people, that's what they're all about, and some people kind of skim over them. So advertising, right? Do you actively try to mix up the ways in which your characters have sex? Obviously, the emotional arc is going to make a sex scene vary over the course of a novel, but I mean, sort of like, do you mix it up? Are there different positions? Are there toys? Is there role playing? Is there, you know, a little light bondage? Because I find it's interesting, and I've gotten both props and some real dings from readers for sort of going in that direction. So do you try to mix it up? Why or why not? Leigh, I'm going to start with you this time.
Yeah, I do actually try to mix it up, and it's very dependent on the character too. My second book is definitely less heat than my first one, because they're just different people, and different people have sex different ways. So yeah, and I do, and different people are comfortable doing different things with sex. So like, yeah, and figuring that out. But yeah, I do vary it and try to vary it so that it doesn't read like the same scene again and again. Because yeah, you will skim over it. I'll skim over it as I'm reading. I'm like, oh, this is boring. It's the same thing again, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Erin.
I definitely try to vary it. Just like Leigh said, it all depends on the character as far as what goes into the sex. I did have a character travel with a strap on to the house of the lady that she was going to have sex with, and it shocked some readers because they were like, oh, I didn't expect that. But also, this was an older character who had been around the block a few times. Like she knew what she wanted, and just because she may have seemed straight-laced, that didn't mean that she didn't know what she wanted in the bedroom. So I think it's important to mix it up, especially if you think about like how many books do you really want to write? Like if you want to write 3 books, then there's 3 ways to have sex that you could write. But like if you want to write 15, 20, 25 books, like you're going to have to mix it up a little, or else it's going to be, not exciting at all. But again, it is going to be character driven first and foremost. But I think writing about bondage and writing about a strap-on or a dildo or a vibrator or those things gives you a little bit of like your own excitement because it's just like it's fun to get your readers going like, holy cow, that's exciting. That's what you want.
Allie, what about you?
Yeah, I think so, because I think Erin's right. I mean, when I first started, it was only a couple books. I'm on book like 30 something now. So you can't, if not, you'd be writing the same sex scene over and over. So I think you do have to vary it, even though sometimes you're right. I mean, some of the readers write back and say, I didn't expect that, or maybe you shouldn't have gone in that direction. But it's like you said, sometimes maybe you should just skim over those parts and listen to the rest of the book. But I think you have to, because if not, you're right. You'd be writing the same sex scene over and over again, just become a little boring. Yeah,
for sure. You're sort of still coming out of the gates.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no,
I'm nodding my head a lot because I hear exactly what they're saying. I think in doing a lot of reading of the more contemporary stuff, you really recognize how much more diverse our readers are and what they're into. And I plan, to provide a lot of variety going forward from, role play. The last one has toys in it. And, I think whatever floats the boat, so to speak. The key is that it really does have to fit the characters again. I think that's just really critical.
I think one of the challenges of this commitment to variety is that you run the risk of kind of inherently narrowing down the percentage of readers who sort of will be turned on by what you write. There are certain sort of things that there's a general sense that most people who, have, sort of sex will identify with. Do you ever really think about how much does sort of that audience feedback play into sort of how far you'll take things? Is there a kind of sex or a way the characters are physically together that you've hesitated to write because of, you know, not being sure it would be received well by kind of the broadest possible reader base?
Is this me? Who are you asking?
Sorry, I haven't called on anyone yet.
Oh,
I was
okay.
actually gauging.
Oh,
my
okay.
That's yours, Erin. You spoke first.
I did too.
This wasn't one of the pre-questions, so I try to like gauge like who's gonna not feel bad if I just call on them first. Erin, you blinked, so it's all you.
Damn it. To be completely honest, and I don't want to say this like offensively, but I really don't. I care what readers think and what they feel when they're reading my work. But at the time that I'm writing the sex scene, it takes so much out of me that like I don't really care if they don't like it. Does that make sense? Because like I'm putting so much emotion and so much of my own like heart and soul into these sex scenes that I'm like, I don't understand why it would be perceived as wrong for these particular characters, because I have spent so much time with them that I feel very comfortable that they're doing the right thing. Now that being said, I haven't really ever had someone come to me and say like, your sex scenes are awful, da da da. So I mean, maybe if that happened, I'd be like, well, maybe I should change that up. So I mean, it's interesting because it's like you don't want to make them do things they don't want to do, but you also want them to be completely like bare. Their soul's bare, their body's bare, everything's bare.
Must be naked.
Right.
I've pulled stuff that somebody has said to me, this is not sexy, and I'm like, all right, point taken. Usually has to be more than one person for that. Like sometimes, you know, because you know, somebody's yum is somebody's yuck. So like, but if more than one person is saying that, I'm like, I have stepped in the wrong direction. So yeah.
Yeah, as a newbie, I haven't had any feedback about that kind of thing. So I'll let Allie take it. I'm sure she has had lots of experience with that.
Yeah. No, I think in this case, it's like you have to, it kind of harkens back to, there used to be a show on HBO called Real Sex. And it was like bizarro stuff but you have to feel good that for whatever bizarre thing you're into, there is someone out there that's into the same thing. So my philosophy has always been that if there's two consenting adults, then, you know, the sky's the limit. It might not be something, but you're not writing yourself, you're writing characters who are living their own truth and they're living their own story. So maybe if I find it uncomfortable, but it fits for the character, you have to put it in. I mean, there's just no other way about it.
That's interesting, Allie, because one of the questions that's come in from our audience is there a place you absolutely won't go in terms of sex in your stories? This is not about your personal limits.
Yeah.
Again,
You know, I would never
panel.
like,
But is there something you won't do?
I don't think I'd ever describe like a gratuitous rape scene or anything like that. But besides that, because I just think, I mean, we got some feedback on this last book because it was about domestic violence. That's why Desi was in the emergency room. So, and it did trigger something, you know, trigger a lot for a lot of people. So we ended up fixing that by putting a little disclaimer. But I think in that case, it's like, first of all, I just don't think I could go there. I don't think emotionally, not that it's ever happened to me, but I just don't think I could do that. That would be the one thing. Everything else is fair game.
And if we were to, I think that's sort of an interesting, because it's sex, but that's not necessarily how we would write like a heat scene between our characters, right? There's something fundamentally sort of not there. Other places you won't go? Can you imagine something, Annie, that you won't put in the book?
I really have to let the characters dictate it. I think I agree with Allie. I mean, there are things that, you know, will turn all kinds of people on and that, you know, I personally have no interest in, but if it fits with my characters, I think it's, you know, worth exploring. And then you just kind of see how the audience reacts to it. And like Lee's had that. situation. You just kind of consider it from there and figure out how you're going to go forward in future books. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Erin, Leigh, do you have?
No, I agree with both of them, what they've said. Those are, the characters dictate, and the limits is, violence, I think, for me.
I got two. Violence, obviously no, and butt play. I'm just not a butt girl. I'm not into anything in or around the butt. I'm not gonna lie. It will never be in my book. It will never. If you also do not like butt play, you are safe with me. I will take care of you.
Like, I think we're all like, we're laughing, but I do think that there is a certain, as much as it's your character, like, you're not your characters, but I think it's very hard to write a scene that you want to come across as really sexy and sensual if it's something that you're really
Not into,
Right.
yeah.
not into, right? And I think there's a certain validity of that and a certain kind of like honesty and authenticity, and like that's just kind of how it's so I respect that answer.
Thank you. I'm so hot right now. I'm like embarrassed. I'm like, oh my God, now everybody knows I don't like butt play.
That's like the second question she gave us, which is it harder to talk about it or write about it, right?
Yeah, true. All of the above.
Okay, let's tackle that question, right? Because I think I was raised Southern Catholic. Like, I think there's a little bit of that residual there. Like, I love writing sex scenes. I enjoy them immensely. I enjoy reading them. I think they're super sexy. I get turned on. I get turned on writing them or reading them. And yet, like, talking about like sex and sexual preferences, like, I'm not going to tell you whether or not I'm into butt play because the idea of that I'm blushing already. So, like, is it
that Southern Catholic girl still alive?
And again, it has no bearing on what I may or may not do, but the sort of talking about it is like profoundly uncomfortable.
Oh.
A hard time writing. So for those of you who like love writing sex scenes, struggle to write sex scenes, is it easier or harder to talk about sex or write about it? Allie?
Wait, what was the question?
She's still thinking about Southern Catholic girl.
That's the best kind.
Allie, I feel like I know you like talking about sex and writing about sex. Is one easier or harder? So let's just make the question.
I'm very shy about talking about sex. Maybe I always like to, stretch my limits and always put me on that sex panel at P-Town, but it's like, no, they're super hot. I know they're red. I would rather, I'd rather write it. I don't like talking about it.
You'd rather write. Annie, write about sex or talk about sex?
I struggle with writing about it. I'd much rather talk about it. I think because, with voice inflection and physical gestures, you can just communicate things more easily. When you're called upon to write, it's unbelievable how difficult it is to kind of imagine like where the hands are, and is it really possible for these people to be doing this? I mean, you're kind of having to describe it as extreme. To me, it's extremely challenging. I'm not embarrassed by it. I just find it a real challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point.
Yeah.
Actually,
Did you pass? Are you passing?
Ooh,
Not me. I'm not passing.
you already answered that. So I find it harder to,
Okay.
yeah. I find it harder to talk about it than to write about it. It's pretty easy to write about it. My wife read my last manuscript and she's like, we need to talk now then.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
All right. Give us all a second to catch our breath.
we should also
Get our blushes down. Question
for Christmas.
Question from the audience. Well, I don't want to go back to the old days and that night they were not parted. The fade to black, which it we're pretty established that none of us sort of use that as our bread and butter. But she longs for a sex scene that's almost completely focused on the emotions and the mental aspects and not just the mechanics. How do you weave emotion into a sex scene? How do you find that balance? Or have you ever written a sex scene that's like almost all about the feelings and very little about kind of the physicality of what's happening? That was a complex question. You can answer any aspect of it that you want. I'm sorry, I'm a moderator who likes
I
convoluted.
think that must be Victoria Villasenor in Incognito.
Why? Because do you not put enough feelings in your, like, you need more feelings?
Like I said, I'm now learning that you can kill people. You just have to do it with very much emotion. Obviously, I was missing that point. So now, but I think in the end, like when we first did it, it was like, you know, she would write and she would put more emotion in it. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? And then so, you know, we went through some examples, and now I think about it. She's always in my head now, which is an unfortunate, not a great thing all the time. But it's made Cain a little mellower. I think not really, because the meat grinder comes out in the new book, but I think that it makes in the end for a better story when you can write with emotion. It doesn't have to be less sexy, but it is better when it has much more emotion than I was doing before. So I think in the end, it makes for a better rounded story.
All right, Erin, I'm going to jump to you then, because I think you have a reputation of writing super high emotion, super high angst stories. Do you ever find yourself writing a sex scene and you're like, oh, wait, they're having sex. They're not just talking about their feelings.
It's not just what's going on in their head. Actually, yes, I do that often, where I'm like, all right, I guess I have to say what they're doing. I guess they're, you know, finding wetness and all that good stuff. So that part is, it's interesting, because I think too, like in the other women, they've only known each other for such a short time that I think the sex was far less emotional than it's been in my previous books, because in my previous books, it takes them a while to have their first sex scene. So they know each other so well. And there's like all this, like, they've already kind of like figured out that they like each other, but it's like, they feel so much for each other that they're like in their heads thinking about everything that's going on and comparing it to past loves and da 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 da. But and like when I actually did this sex scene, I was like, okay, it's just got to be mechanics in this one. It's just gonna be. And then I found myself pulling in too much emotion, and I was like, no, Erin, come on. I think it's just impossible for me to not be emotional about sex. So it's almost impossible for my characters to not be emotional about sex. It's like, I don't think I'd ever be that one night stand girl. I'm definitely, and I don't think my characters are.
Yeah.
They say they are, but they aren't.
I write erotica for the same reason. Too wordy. This quote, it's too wordy.
All right, Leigh, not to pick on you, but I have the privilege of knowing you have the opposite problem, because at this point, I don't even explain. I just write feelings.
Oh, yeah.
Feelings in your manuscripts, because I want more feelings. So how do you tap into the emotions, maybe when you sort of are focused on the mechanics of a sex scene?
I've started to, I've realized that I've developed tells in my writing. Anytime anybody nods, I'm like, oh, they're feeling something. I should stop and figure that out. So when I'm writing the rough draft now, I'm like, feelings, you know. So Barbara, who's my editor, also doesn't have to say that as well. So, so like noticing where I'm kind of putting a filler gesture is really actually how I've started to kind of tackle the emotion piece. But yeah, sometimes it's hard too, because it's not like my characters get away from me and I'm not in control, but sometimes I don't quite understand what they're feeling at that particular time. So it's like, I don't have that answer yet. So for me, it's like, this is happening, and I know that instinctually there are emotions happening, but figuring out what they are takes a little more deep. I have Erin's opposite problem with emotions. Like you have the mechanical problem. I don't have that, but I have the emotional problem where it's like, gotta get in their head.
Maybe we should write a book together.
That would be funny. That would be good.
Right.
Annie.
I think I have both problems. I mean, I struggle with writing sex scenes, and I hear Barbara in my head too, because she's also my editor, saying, what are they feeling at this point? You know, what is actually going on in their mind? So I imagine, you know, I've been imagining this topic as, you know, when an Amazon box lands on your doorstep and it's just this cardboard box and you're expecting it, you know what's going to come, like the sex in a novel, you know it's going to come, but it's so much nicer when it's wrapped in gift wrap with a big bow on it, like that it looks really pretty, you know, that it appeals to you, that it lures you, that your characters are vulnerable to each other and they have all this sensitivity. And it just makes, you know, it makes opening the package that much more enticing. And I'm learning, and I have Barbara's voice in my head saying, what are they feeling? And, you know, how many hands do they have? Because
For anyone who doesn't know, Barbara is, I believe, watching you. So be cautious. Those she is, in fact, spying on all of you right now.
She is. She's got all the next titles for my books picked out.
Remember, she said she knows everything.
yes, that's right.
I like sort of, I don't know if you meant to sort of like describe that as a striptease, but that's kind of what I got out of it. And it makes me think of like the difference between like, you know, just sort of taking all your clothes off and then like sort of a burlesque performance or a striptease, and that like there's sort of so much more to than just sort of like getting naked and tumbling into bed. Although that's sometimes kind of what the characters need to have happen. I'm going to take another audience question because it's too good not to. What's the most hilarious thing you've had to Google for a sex scene?
I don't even know.
Or maybe Erin hasn't, because if she won't go there, she won't go there.
For
I'm
Erin,
not-
it's
well,
not butt plug.
It's not. It's not. I don't want to know that. Oh my god.
Oh, Erin, I'm going to save you. I didn't Google any, but I did buy this book right here,
Oh.
which is a fantastic book if you're struggling to find words for things. So yeah, it's a funny question.
Nice.
Anyone have something like hilarious that they research?
I've Googled a lot of things, but I don't think for sex. Like, how long would it take someone to be fed through a grinder?
You were on a list somewhere, you know.
Is the answer to that on Google? Like, I don't think I know if you can find that answer on Google.
Oh yeah,
Like,
you can.
literally, if it's like a pig and it's about the size of a person, then it would give you.
Sure. Yeah.
The equivalent.
Yeah, no, I don't have a funny sex. Yeah.
I don't really Google sex because I'm just like, well, if I really want to know, I'll just go look at some porn.
That's research, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Its own version of
definitely.
Googling.
Yeah, I've definitely researched like different strap-ons and things like that, different dildos, just because like, I don't know what everybody has or what's available. So I think, you know, that's definitely, and like, I mean, I've researched like what you really want to use to like tie someone up with, because like in one of my books, that's going to happen. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so I don't want to use a piece of rope. You know what I mean? So
somebody out there is going to go, no, that's wrong.
Right. They're going to be like, you used a silk scarf? That's not fair. Okay. Well, yeah. Like, so, I mean, there's definitely different things you research, but I've never researched a butt plug. It's just so everybody knows.
I need your address later so I can send you one for Christmas.
Oh my God. I will. Honestly, I'll give it to you. Hey.
Oh my God.
I will say, like, rope, there's a lot to learn about rope. I'm just gonna leave it at that. But I think this is a nice segue into another audience question, which is also never do handcuffs are very overrated. They're much more fun things.
Hey, Aurora, I have a question for you.
In most of the books I've read, if toys are involved, it's almost always a strap-on. I don't see a lot of other toys, things like vibrators. This audience member didn't say this, but I'm going to pick on me again. Things like anal beads. What other toys, like, do you sort of always fall back on the strap-on, or do you go toy shopping? Do you look in your treasure chest? Do you watch some porn? Like, where do you kind of go for some of that inspiration into something sort of beyond the strap-on? Annie? You look a little bit alarmed, but I feel like
No, not at all. There are plenty of places online to shop for things. And I actually, in my second book, the When Sparks Fly, that just came out, I do have a scene with a toy that is not a dildo. It is like a 2-part vibrator, and I don't go into a lot of detail because, again, I'm just kind of feeling my way through, you know, how people will perceive it, I guess. But that's what I did. I just went online and shopped around, and I ordered it.
Good for you.
and the most important question is, like, is that a write-off? Like that?
Oh, it totally
Totally
is.
legit.
My account says it is.
Yes.
Yeah. I need to go find some receipts.
Yes, you do.
For all that rope you're telling us about.
Although it's interesting, like, it takes way more rope to properly tie someone up than you would think. Like that's,
Again, Aurora, I have questions.
I'm just saying though, like, it's true.
Just to help.
This is where they thought this panel was gonna go, but like, here we are.
What tomatoes to plant, how much rope to buy.
That hardware section actually doubles as other things, you know.
Hardware.
Mhm.
That's right.
Home Depot.
Sort of other sort of things, like, how do you feel inspired to go beyond the strap-on? Anybody else kind of want to chime in?
Larry Flynn has a store in New Orleans, so if you are interested in doing that, it will definitely give you some ideas. Most of the time, you just walk around horrified that anyone would want to try this, but it will definitely give you some ideas.
I feel like we would be at Women's Week right now. I think we should sort of, like, a little nod and homage to how sad we're not in Provincetown. There's a great shop there, Toys of Erin.
There is, yeah.
Highly recommend. I was like, we've totally, like, hijacked into a sex toy talk, and that's probably
Well, that's a good question about the why don't you use others, and I think people sometimes you just forget. Sometimes you're like, you get a little stuck in this, like, kind of, even in kink there's a convention, there's conventional kink, you know, and so you get stuck in that kind of, like, yeah, no, that's a good challenge that we should take from, is like, do more.
I like conventional kink. That's like,
There is conventional
that
kink.
is-
Everything. Yeah.
yeah, but you're right. You're absolutely right. Like, it's like almost, okay, so a strap-on is kinky, but, you know, anything else beyond that, you're like, well, I'm
not
skirting
conventional.
it.
Not
Yeah,
conventional.
you know, keep it
Conventional
nice
kink.
and simple with a
Cross the
strap-on.
line. You cross the line.
It's super interesting though. I had a reviewer once ding me for the characters having sex outside, and it wasn't even just like outside. It was like in the bed of a pickup truck with, like, blankets and pillows, and they're like, "That's so unsanitary." And I was like,
Oh,
that's like the
God.
last thing I thought I was gonna get dinged for. But apparently, like, for some people, that's, like, just really off-putting.
That's so funny that you say that about getting dinged for unsanitary sex. Like, how do you, I know I'm not the moderator, but I have that question now. Like, have you all been dinged for that? Because I have too. Like, your sex was so unsanitary. Like, like, and unsafe. And I'm like, I guess there's like this line that I just don't think that like a dental dam is needed. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah,
I
no.
don't think they need to go wash their hands and me describe that before they, or brush their teeth, or, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't, I think that there's that moment that takes you out of it. And describing all that seems odd. And so sex in the back of a pickup truck would be beautiful in my mind. And it's not unsanitary. So is that just like a thing? Like, what do you guys think?
Unless you're on the interstate, then maybe not. But-
Someone else better be driving.
exactly. I know, but you know, the thing about it is that usually it's a very small percentage of people.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why I try never to read the reviews too much,
Yeah.
because it's like, you don't want to live anymore, but you just, you know, because it's like, it wasn't about sex, but when I wrote Calling the Dead, it took me forever to write a sequel to it. I was going to make it a series. And then this one lady wrote this review and she gave me 3 stars. So it wasn't like horrible. It wasn't like 1 star, but she was like, there was so much like gratuitous violence in here. And it was like, I'm sorry, did you not read like about a serial killer in New Orleans? And so the sex is kind of the same thing. I mean, you kind of have to figure that it's not going to be the missionary position in every single sex scene or
Right.
whatever it is that you do. You know, that sometimes that's why you read, is to learn new things. At least that's why I read.
I'm sad that we didn't have, we don't have that much more time because we didn't put this in our sort of initial questions, but I think things like safe sex practices are so hard to work into a romance and still keep things healthy. But one that I sort of always try to at least sort of have a nod to at some place in the book is consent. How do you address things like consent and or safe sex in like 30 seconds or less? I'm sorry, because we don't have that much time, or you can have a minute, maybe.
I have never talked about safe sex just because I feel like my characters have gotten to know each other so well that it's like, I don't think that that's necessary. Consent, though, I try to always, there's some sort of nod to it that this is something they both want. It's been very either explicitly said or it's there.
Yes, same.
Yeah, no, I do put consent, but that's why I don't write erotica. So I don't think safe sex would be, you know, if you meet somebody at the grocery store and then take in the frozen food section and then take them home, then maybe, yes, you should write that in. But if they've been dating forever, then I think that's okay. You don't have to like explicitly put step by step, I wash my hands and put on rubber gloves.
Right? Yeah.
Unless that's part of the scene.
Exactly.
Because that, yeah, definitely
Yeah.
kind of could be. One more quick question, and then I want to know what you're all sort of working on now, which is what's the difference between do you differentiate having sex and making love?
Oh yeah, there's a difference.
Yeah.
There is a difference, yeah.
Making love.
Do you sort of
that's
always progress?
emotions, way more emotions.
Emotion, Aurora,
Right.
emotion.
That's my book. Like, so I said, you know, sexy times. My books are pretty much sexy times 2, make love. Like, that's, you get it? Okay, we only have a few minutes left, but I would like to hear kind of what you are working on now and where people can most easily find you if they want to reach out, chat, get to know you a little bit better, and maybe talk about sex toys. Erin.
I have Guarding Evelyn coming out in March, and I'm waiting for edits back on that. Barbara, hello. Since I know you're there. And I have Swift Vengeance, which I wrote with Jackie D and Jean Copeland, coming out in June. And that's like a serial killer thing. And to be completely honest, I'm not writing at all right this second. I'm getting revving up to submit a proposal for sort of like a realm jumping book that I'm going to dip my toes in, like a science fiction-y kind of romance. So I'm excited. So hopefully it gets picked up. I don't know, but yeah.
Where can people find you?
Oh, I'm sorry, erinzach.com and Facebook, Erin Zach, and Instagram, Twitter, Erin Zach Writes. So all social media and yeah, erinzach.com. Sorry.
Thank you. Annie.
Great. I am building so I wrote first about Alberta. The newest book is set in Manitoba. So now I'm tackling the province in between, the exciting province of Saskatchewan. So it's going to be set in Saskatchewan with an RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, a detective, and a structural geologist while she's a professor at the university. So that'll be the list. And then I'll write about the Maritimes where I live.
Oh, fantastic.
So, yeah.
Just like, and where can people find you?
I'm sorry? Oh, you can find me at Annie 10 McDonald, like the number 10, McDonald at gmail.com, through the BSB website, and on Facebook.
Excellent. Vali.
In February, the next Devil book comes out, The Devil Incarnate. And then in May, it's a treasure hunt. It's a new set of characters. It's called A Woman to Treasure. And you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and on the BSB website.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Leigh Hayes.
You can find me on Facebook, the BSB website, and Instagram. And I'm just in the middle of researching some books that I just want to keep on the download for right now. But
you're not even going to commit to.
I'm not even going to commit. I don't want to put it out there so much, but. So, yep, that's me right now.
It might involve butt play, Erin.
It could very much. Yeah, it's going to be a little more angsty.
Well, it's angsty butt play.
Angsty butt play.
It's my next.
It's all about that.
That's my stripper name.
Yep.
Oh, no, cool. Yeah.
With a furry tail attached to it.
That's unconventional kink.
Oh,
I'm glad that the secret baby goats didn't come into this panel, because that might be like my hard limit of like,
Yeah.
in writing a sex scene. This has been so much fun. We may have gone a little past PG. I don't think we were told to keep it PG-13, but I mean, thanks.
We're still cursing.
We didn't really
Right?
lose audience members, so hopefully we didn't offend.
I
too many
didn't
people, but
curse.
it's so much fun.
No, but you talked about butt play, Erin, so.
But I didn't say ass play.
You just did.
I know.
I don't think we used the word fuck at all during this panel.
Oh
and
my God.
So
you're
right.
right.
Credit for that.
Yeah.
Thank you all, audience, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did, or at least I did, because y'all cracked me up. Thank you for spending part of your weekend with us. It was lovely to see you all. Thank you, panelists, for giving us your time and letting me ask you some pretty uncomfortable questions. And hopefully we will see you all very soon. Take care.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Aurora.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.